I did work with Caitlyn Jenner. I mean, from a social media standpoint, that family is probably the most well-known worldwide, right?
In history. You told me that psychedelics is what opened all of this for you.
It is some of the hardest work I've ever done.
Ooh, what would happen if everybody was to do this work?
How did I lose myself? I'm sitting there at age 50 going, who am I?
Spirituality and capitalism belong together. Those thoughts, those feelings, that comes from something bigger than I am. And together I believe we can all grow. That's how we're going to change the world. That's how we're going to change the planet.
All right. Well, I'm joined today by Sandy Lutton, and what an honor it is to have you out here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. So tell me this. What does it mean to you to be in alignment? You say this is something extremely important to you, like to be in alignment. What is that? Like when you say that, what does that mean?
For me, to be in alignment is to be connected to God, the higher self, like to really understand who you are, what you desire, and what's right for you. Being able to call in that intuition, really understand that, that gut decision and what's coming up for you.
And this has become a big mission of yours.
Huge.
Because I said, hey, like, what's the one thing like you really want to talk about? Like, I did all these things, and you've had a hell of a career. You've done all kinds of amazing things. You've got tons of accomplishments. You've made a lot of money. You've impacted a lot of lives. But for some reason, this is the one thing that sticks out of everything we could have talked about.
I thought that I needed to accomplish all these things and to have that title. I put so much value in what I was told, this is what success looks like. And I realized that I got to a space where I had the success and I had the title and I had the paycheck or the bank account. I had all the things that I thought, but yet my life was falling apart. I got fired. My marriage was ending. My father was, diagnosed with a terminal illness. And I realized I had no idea who I was or what I wanted in life. And I was living life the way I thought I should, as we talk about should, or because the way someone told me. And I thought, wow, how did I lose myself? And I'm sitting there at age 50 going, who am I?
And so at 50, you had this moment in time where you're standing at the edge of the abyss and trying to figure out like who it is that you are at 50 years old. I mean, off camera, you were explaining to me like, I didn't know my hobbies. I didn't know anything. I had just lost my husband, my job, like all of that. But take me back a little bit, because one of the things you were talking about is that you're in Virginia, you're working basically on the Hill, and you're representing some of the largest, you got politicians, you've got some really important people you're working with this point in time, and really your ego and who you are is tied into all of this. How did you get there?
Yeah, I had been in a sales career my entire life. I kind of fell into sales early on. I was good at it, and I realized I could make a lot of money at it, so I just pursued it. I did that in the technology world, then into management consulting, and I knew there was more for me, but I didn't know what it looked like. And I actually resigned from my job and got a phone call that day. Had not told anyone I'd resigned except for the people in my office. And I got a call that day, and it was this woman she was an executive coach. She had been trying to reach me for over a year. And she called me and she said, hey, I was about to leave the office and I got to the elevator and she goes, something just told me I needed to call you. She goes, so why am I calling you?
Well,
and I said, well, I don't know why you're calling me. I said, but I did just resign from my job today. And she said, oh, we should talk. So we just scheduled a meeting to talk. I was going to take some time off. I wanted to, this was March timeframe. I knew spring break was coming up. I wanted to spend that time with my kids. I was going to take the summer off and just figure out what was next for me. 2 weeks later, I got what I thought was my dream job. I had the title, the executive title of Chief Revenue Officer. I was going into this company that represented some really prolific speakers of our time, politicians, artists. I mean, you name it. Anybody on that circuit at some point in time we represented. And so I was really excited to go in to tackle this and learn this new industry and really flex my executive skills. And I knew it was going to be a lot, and I knew it was going to take a lot of my time, but I was like, I'm in for the fight. I didn't realize there was going to be a fight, but for some reason I just went into it going, I'm in for the fight. I'm in it to win it. So what do I need to do to be truly successful at this?
So one of the things I notice a lot of times when we get our dream, when we get the thing that we've been waiting for and all this stuff, do you feel like that what you had accomplished in being in that space, do you feel like it was all it was made out to be?
I found myself in positions like being at meetings at Davos with former prime ministers and holding meetings and sitting at the table with some of these people that I never imagined I would be in front of. Behind the scenes, it was the most toxic job I had ever had in my entire life. And I just could not see it in the time because I didn't want that to be the case. I really wanted to turn this thing around. I really believed in it and the potential, but I was one of the only ones, which was the unfortunate part.
Did you find most of the people that you were representing, or the organization or company was representing, these, we don't need to name any of the names, but I know we're talking about very famous people. We're talking about people in, DC. We're talking about politicians. We're talking about all these things. Do you feel like a lot of them walk their talk, or do you feel like a lot of it was just a bunch of, how do I want to say, for the cameras?
So many of them, especially politicians, are trained for that media persona. So you rarely saw the true them. So yes, I would hear a lot of people say the same things over and over again, give the same speech every single time, maybe change the stories a little bit. But there were some who I think really inspired me to where I am now. And there was one gentleman who, I used to get asked a lot, who's your favorite speaker? That was a really tough question for me. And the reason why was because it was usually that person. Everyone wanted you to say that famous person. I did work with Caitlyn Jenner. I mean, from a social media standpoint, that family is probably the most well-known worldwide, right?
In history, right.
And so it wasn't that. It was that person who was born of circumstance, took it and wrote it and made the most of it, And one example was Anthony Robles, and his movie just came out, Unstoppable. He's actually local to the Scottsdale area, or Phoenix area. And he was born with one leg. He became the NCAA champion in wrestling and ended up winning an ESPY award. And his life was incredible, incredibly tough. He was born without a leg, so now he's trying to do sports that no one wanted him to be in because of this. And he overcame it, and his movie came out, Unstoppable. It's so good. But I would watch Anthony get on a stage and move an audience. I watched him one time in front of a group of real estate agents, and it was probably 500 people in the room. And he got on the stage, and he would walk on with his crutches, and he would tell his story. And he told it so humbly, and everyone in the room, not a dry eye, just truly motivated, truly inspired to overcome, like whatever challenges are in your life. And I watched him move an audience, and I started to see the magic in when you put the right person, the right message, the right voice in front of the right audience, that's where the magic happened. And that was the that's what I took with me when I left that job. I took that with me. I wanted to inspire more of that. I wanted to put the right people with the right audiences. I wanted people with great stories to tell, to have the courage to get out there and tell it.
Mm-hmm. What do you think separates a good, like someone that's an amazing speaker? Because you've seen a lot of them. You represent a lot of them. What separates the ones that are like okay versus the ones that are amazing? I mean, the story you're telling me about is great, right? But I know majority of speakers I've ever seen, it's always canned. Like they've got it. They know that, I'm going to step here on stage. I'm going to do this. I'm going to cough here. I'm going to clap here. Like it's an art, right? And it's a performance. Mm-hmm. What makes a good performer from all those speakers that you've seen?
For me, it's the people who were actually living what they were speaking. As you said, there's a message. They know what people want to hear, and they get out there and they deliver it. There were a lot of people, and I won't name names, who absolutely did not live up to what they would inspire other people to do and the messages that they would send. They didn't live up to it. And therefore, it would become very inauthentic. And I think anyone can learn to become a performer.
Sure.
We used to work with all these speakers. We'd bring in coaches. They'd learn to become a performer. But it's those who are authentically wanting to connect with an audience, who up front investigated who's in this audience and what's going to be important for them to hear from my message.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it would make a difference.
Recently, I heard a gentleman I was talking with, and he was explaining to me, you can tell a lot by a speaker, by someone that's up there and they're there. There's the, what he calls the back of the stage speakers and the front of the stage speakers. And he said the front of the stage speakers, when they get done, they walk out into the audience and they talk to people and they shake hands and they're in gratitude that you've come here and that I can, be part of this experience with you. And then there's the other people that walk right out the backstage. They're done. They take their paycheck and they go home, and that's it. It's just a gig. It's just another way to start to stack more money or to sell books or whatever. But it's not authentic. It's not an authentic mission of theirs, right? And we talked about at the beginning, we talked about the word alignment. Mm-hmm. I feel like that we have to be in alignment with our message. We have to be in alignment with our integrity. And more importantly, when that alignment happens, no different than when we decided to bring on this terminology, the spiritual capitalist, there's a lot of things I've had to look inside of myself and say, okay, am I in alignment? Right. Am I living my actual words? Is what I'm doing, is that okay? Is it not okay? Is this about, have I changed enough of my identity to be able to represent such a big concept? We're not talking a small concept you can put into a box. We're talking about something very large. And so it takes big shoes and not just having big shoulders, to be able to do that. When you were involved in a lot of these politicians and speakers and so on, one of the things I saw recently that happened is you had Donald Trump that got elected, right? And then you had Obama before that whole thing happening, and he was talking, against, Trump and this whole thing. And then on TV, you see that they go to the funeral, which I know most of us saw, and they're shaking hands and they're butting it up and all of that. My experience of watching politicians and being involved with them in different ways is, I call it trading ponies. The public sees one thing over here like a magician, and on the back end, there's a whole other conversation going on that you don't see. Like, we're going to perform for the cameras, like a WWF type of fight,
right,
to get attention from the media. Kanye West is brilliant at this. Not that I'm a massive fan of what he does, but behind the cameras, it's a whole different conversation. Being involved in a lot of these rooms you're involved in, did you see that to be true, or is this just something as more of an illusion that I see just because of what I'm reading with the media?
Oh, absolutely. I had one experience when we were in Davos at the World Economic Forum, and we hosted a private event for our speakers and some key other clients, things like that. And the first thing that was asked is, will there be media in the room? We're like, nope, no media. It's just cocktail hour. This is who will be there. And, they'd come in, they'd Scotland Yard, Secret Service, whoever needed to come in, scope out the room. Okay, good. And then they'd come in, and I had two former UK prime ministers sitting over in the corner, and I had to pull them out to come and interact with the people in the room because they were just catching up. They were buddies. They were catching up. And so it was interesting to see them interact that way when the cameras were off, there was no media in the room, and they could just be themselves. Absolutely, they were friends. They're all in it together. They're each other's peers, really.
Yeah. It feels like it, from the outside, for me, it feels like there's one side here, there's one side here, and I think it's an illusion. There's actually just, maybe it's all just the same thing, right? And it's just this different game we play back and forth every couple years, and then we have an illusion that we're just moving the chips. Yes, there's some major things being done right now. Yes, there's some major things being done, with the last administration and so on. And this is not about politics. It was just something I was curious about from that perspective. So you go from the fact of working and having your dream job, and I'm assuming putting in more hours than you even thought you were going to do, being treated very poorly, not seeing a whole lot of your children, traveling all over the world. It looks very glamorous. But then there becomes a point in time to where you lose your job. Things aren't working well in your marriage at that time.
Right.
Your marriage, you guys decide to split. And I understand that your dad was going through some things as well at the same time. what becomes, I mean, that point of your breaking, as you were telling me earlier, what happens at that point? Like when this is all occurring and you're trying to figure out how do I balance, you know, one from the left.
Yeah. It's just hearing you repeat my story back to me. I immediately felt it in my gut. I'm like, oh, and it was such a scary, feeling very alone time in my life. And I had moved out of my house and was in this new house, empty house, and I had no idea who I was. I remember sitting on my couch, I did have that, and looking around the room going, how would I decorate this? I have this blank canvas right now. How do I decorate it? And I thought, I don't even know who I am anymore. What do I like? Who am I? How did I become this person? And I found it to be terrifying. I was, like I said, I felt very alone in that moment. And, but I was curious enough that I'm like, this is not me. I knew that. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know where to take it. I didn't know where I was going to go from there. And I did get a phone call one day from my friend Jim. And he's like, hey, I got this idea. I've been working on going through this journey of my own. I want to maybe get on the stage and speak about it. But I'd love your thoughts and your input and what's going on with you. And we were just catching up. And I said, well, I'm thinking about starting this business and finding it really scary. I'm doing a little consulting work right now. And I didn't tell him all of my story at that point. And he's like, well, we should just get together. So we got together and he shared with me what he was going through. And I said, well, I'm going through a divorce. He goes, me too. And it was almost gleeful. Not that was a gleeful moment for him, but it was gleeful in that, like, we didn't feel alone. Like
Exactly.
two people who were connecting in that hardship that they were having at that time. And he was like, no, entrepreneurship's hard. And he's a serial entrepreneur and he has been hugely successful. And I'm seeing this person who has, in my opinion, figured it all out and has it all together. And I'm hearing him talk about, oh my God, it's so scary. I know exactly what you mean. I'm starting a new thing myself. And I thought, wow, if he's struggling, then maybe I'm not so messed up. Maybe I'm not so broken. And it kind of inspired me to know that I wasn't in it alone. But he also guided me down this path. He goes, well, here's some things that I've tried that might help you. And so I was terrified. I was terrified to even talk to anybody about what was going on in my life because I was judging myself.
Of course.
So I certainly didn't want to be judged by anyone else.
How do you get to a point in time though to where when you said like, listen, I didn't know what I liked. I didn't know my hobbies. I didn't know what things I liked. How do you get to a point in time where you become so disconnected from who you are that you all of a sudden don't recognize because now you had your perfect life, you had the perfect job. It looked really good on the outside, as it does for everybody. This story is so common. I don't even know where to start.
So common.
But how do you lose yourself that much? You're not a drug addict. You're not you don't come from these things. And at the same time, the woman you told me about was a woman that said, your family wanted you to do things one way, and you says that's interesting. Like that's great, but I'm going to do it my way. And people have said, well, you can't do those things. You're like, well, I'm going to do those things. And at the same time, play it really safe all in between, right? So how do you get to that point in time where you lose yourself?
I was more concerned about doing what the world was telling me I should do and what would make me successful. I was focused on being a parent and taking care of everyone else and being that person who... I loved a good crisis, not my crisis, but someone else's, because then I wouldn't have to focus on me. And it became easier to do that, not look in the mirror, focus on other things, focus on other people's problems. I loved that. I would eat that up all day long. I used to be called, in one of my jobs, we decorated our offices for Christmas. And I decorated mine as like on Charlie Brown, Lucy, where it says the psychiatrist is in.
Yeah.
I had the whole Charlie Brown Christmas thing with that. That's what my desk was because that's how people saw me. They would come in and talk to me. And it was easier for me to just take that on and not address my own things, not look at the fact that communication in my marriage was a real problem, things like that. And so if I could just fix all the other problems. So I got so consumed in the job, right? I've got to hit the, when I was in sales, I got to hit this quota. When I was an executive, it was, we got to hit this profit margin. It was, I must win this battle no matter what. And that was my escape. That was me running, right? Always, oh, you need me to do you need me to take a long trip. I mean, I remember one time packing for a trip. I had 3 suitcases because I was going to 3 different places. And I went to London, to Austin for the South by Southwest, came back to DC, had someone meet me at the airport and swap suitcases with me, and then went to Florida. I was gone for 16 days, which is the most time I'd ever spent away from my children at one time. And that was just me running. I didn't have to do that. I kind of signed up for it. Even though I complained the whole time, I can't believe they're making me do this. I never pushed back. Mm. And so I think it was allowing myself to just get so focused on what everyone else needs, what everyone else wants, and pleasing and giving them what they need and being what they needed me to be. And then suddenly I had no idea who I was.
So when do you then find the strength to find out who you are? Is it there when you're sitting on the couch and you I paint the scene, I can see you sitting on this couch and looking around and being like, okay, now what? Like, I've lost everything. I'm not probably feeling lovable this moment in time. I'm not feeling successful. The things that I got, which I thought was going to bring me happiness and joy and peace and make me important and all those things, now that doesn't really matter, right? Like, I've given up everything and now I have nothing, but yet I have everything. It's an interesting place to be.
I had this glimpse of who I used to be. And I remember it was a picture I remembered of me in college. I think it was the day I was moving out. I was just graduated, moving out. And I just had the biggest smile on my face. And I remember, like, that girl was so excited about what was next, even though she had no idea what was next. And she was fearless and she was ready to jump in and tackle and go wherever things led. And I just wanted to find her again. I'm like, she was fun. She was funny. Like, I didn't feel like I was funny. I didn't feel like I was fun. I couldn't understand why anyone wanted to be around me, honestly, at that point in my life. But there was that glimpse of that. Like, she's there somewhere. And so it started with a friend of mine saying, you've gone through a lot. Have you gotten any help? Have you talked to anyone? And I was like, no, really, I don't know who to talk to. I don't know where to go.
Because you're helping everybody else.
I don't know who to talk to. And I said, I guess I probably should go to therapy or something, because that's all I knew of. And she said, I don't know if you're really the talk therapy type. And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, well, maybe a life coach. And I was like, no. In my experience in the past with life coaches was more like career coaches. Yeah. And I was like, no, that's not what I need right now. And she goes, no, I know someone that you might want to consider talking to. And again, for me, that was divine intervention. That was a divine appointment. She brought me to this woman she's the grounded canary. You can find her. She's on Instagram. She's website, The Grounded Canary. She is a beautiful life coach, and she is full of love. And I didn't want to tell anyone my story. I was separated and going through a divorce. But I never told my father before he passed. I didn't want to tell anyone. I was so ashamed that I was there in that position. I just kept it a secret, hid in my house. And I remember getting on the phone with her to just to do a consultation. And she said, I cried through the whole thing. I don't know that I even got a word out. And I apologized the whole time for crying. And she's like, don't ever apologize for crying. I'd never heard anyone say that before. And then she's just like, I think we can work together. I was like, okay, I hope I can get through the next session. And the next session just kind of opened the door, and she got me comfortable talking about it. And we started doing some inner child work and things like that. And then, other people like Jim had said, hey, I've been down a similar journey. This is what helped me, and gave me the idea around some retreats to go to. So I pursued that. And I was super fearful, but I eventually, like, what I was the most afraid of facing, I got really curious about. I gave in. I didn't give in to the fear. I leaned into it and got really curious about, wait, who am I?
But here's the thing. You told me that psychedelics is what opened all of this for you. Absolutely. And before that, you had never done psychedelics.
No.
Like, it was not. Not you.
I
No
wouldn't
way.
have even told. I mean,
I was just in Davos. Like, why would I be doing psychedelics?
So I went to a retreat, and they used a lot of like healing work, limiting beliefs work, things like that, trauma work, and they used psychedelics. And so this was my first time trying that. I really didn't know what I was getting into. But what it did help me do was get curious and not be afraid of what I might face. And I ended up doing some trauma work around losing my daughter, who was born prematurely and died the same day she was born. Her name was Jillian. And I never really gave myself time to grieve. And I didn't even fully understand that that's a piece of what I really needed to work on. And I did. I had so much guilt and shame around that. I had suppressed it so much that it took the ego away. It took the fear away, the psychedelics did, and allowed me to just face it full on and had the most beautiful experience of letting go of the guilt, letting go of the shame, and just having so much peace around the fact that her time with me was exactly what it was supposed to be and not meant to be more.
Ooh. I mean, to be able to see that you bring this child into the world and then lose that child so quickly, and to have that level of peace about that knowing, not even an understanding, but that knowing that this was just part of this, you know. And what I've noticed throughout our conversation here is that there's many phone calls, there's many things that happen, and you have a lot of divinely orchestrated things that everything is happening for you, even though in the moment it is brutally difficult, not allowing yourself to feel through any of that, not like having to just be there for everybody and not yourself. And then finally recognizing like, oh my gosh, like I haven't even been there for me. I'm there for everybody.
Right.
But I'm not there for me. And all that pain that was probably held in the womb and all that deep energy to be able to release that. That's so beautiful and so brave of you.
It is some of the hardest work I've ever done, but by far the most rewarding work I've ever done. Like getting to know me again and being able to say, I really like me. I actually do. I really like me. And so that was a big win for me when I could get to that point and look in the mirror and look at my life. And I also realized like I was judging me for specific events, decisions that I had made, things like that. There's a whole story there. From the day we were conceived to the day we died, there's a whole story there. Till this moment right now, there's a whole story. And so it actually helped me to become more compassionate to others, like more compassionate with myself, start to understand, oh, that's why I made that decision. That's why I, thought this way or had that limiting belief that held me back. I realized like there was a whole story behind it that I wasn't giving myself credit for. And I probably wasn't giving others credit for their story either.
Did you notice when you just said that, we were talking about alignment, right? I watched you just kind of like grab your heart and grab like the bottom, and you're just like, it was just like this space, right?
Yes.
Alignment is this like straight line, you know, and there's a place where we know and understand, not even understand, a knowing of when we're in alignment and when we're not.
Right.
We have a feeling at least, maybe not the knowledge, maybe not the whole pattern of all that. So because you hadn't done psychedelics up to that point in time, what was your misconception of psychedelics?
Oh, that, it would, well, I was of the world of drugs kill. I believed that 80s message that drugs kill and psychedelics are drugs and bad people do drugs and all that. So that was it. I had heard over a few years prior to this experience that it was being used to treat PTSD and things like that. So I'd gotten curious about it, and I'd actually watched a documentary. So I understood that there is another use for it, and it isn't just recreational people being reckless, because that's what my thought of doing drugs and getting high is reckless, right? And so but knowing that I had friends who had tried this and it had created breakthroughs that they had never been able to do on their own, I was like, okay, I'm willing to try this, because there's more here than I even realize or that I'm willing to accept. And I just knew I had this huge fear of like, what am I going to find? There was something to that. Like, why do I have this innate fear of what I'm going to find?
Why do you think then, from your perspective, the government and religion and all kinds of different organizations have been trying to guard this and tell us that this is bad, wrong, and you're gonna. I mean, I remember when I was younger, my grandfather said, if you ever do LSD, you're going to go home and kill your family. Like crazy stuff, right?
You will be a crazy
Yeah,
person.
you're going to lose your mind. My dad would say, I'm going to put you in an insane asylum.
Yeah,
and I'm like, oh, man. But obviously, I'm a very curious person, so that didn't stop me. But
So, all right, what was the question? It was...
why do you think that religions and governments have been trying to hold back psychedelics from moving forward into the world?
Well... part of it's they can't control it. So I think there's that part of it. The other part is maybe it's the pharmaceutical companies can't make money on it. I don't know.
I think it's different. I think it is that all of a sudden you learn to think for yourself and you learn to see what God is and what God is not.
Right.
And you get to see how interconnected we are, and that this whole conversation of being an enemy to somebody is an illusion, including with ourselves.
Right.
If all of a sudden we are happy within ourselves, we are content within ourselves, and we are aligned within ourselves, then guess what? I don't need to buy any more shit.
Right. That's right.
I don't have to consume anymore. Someone's going to stand in the pulpit, can't tell me what God is and what God is not. Because now I have a direct reflection, conversation, and I understand what self-love is, and I don't need all these other things around me to fill me up, because I recognize all of it. It's all bullshit. No different than having the great career that you had, or being at Davos, or the perfect marriage, or all these things of control. It's all this big illusion. Now that's easy to say. I get that, because at the same time I say that, I go, yeah, and you also need this, right? It's both sides of it, but at least now I have the awareness of it versus the consumption mindset of, well, who am I without this? And I need to be this. And then it breaks apart all the rules, right? It breaks apart the rules all the way from your family to religion to how government should be ran, all this stuff. And you're like, hold on a second. Whew, what would happen if everybody was to do this work?
Oh, right. Well, it'd be a much happier world. I'm confident of that. And I think you're right. For me, the psychedelics helped me to remove the ego and really get into what I was feeling, that subconscious of what was going on, and the experiences I had that I couldn't remember from childbirth and things like that. It opened up a portal, if you will. I don't really know what a portal is, but it opened up a portal that allowed me to see something that my ego would not allow me to see. And I think you're right. It gave me that perspective on life and love that was so different than what I knew. And it was so much deeper. And it helped me ultimately to connect deeper with God. That's really where it allowed me to have that connection. I'd always heard, been born and raised in church, right? You got to have a relationship with God. But I also heard you got to follow the rules and you got to do all this. So that controlling the mind, right? You'll never be good enough.
You're not very good at that anyways.
Right. So for me, it was that connection of that higher self, understanding, knowing who I was from a deeper level, where I came from. That changed everything for me. I no longer needed the title. I no longer needed the dollars in the bank account. I mean, it just knowing that I had always been taken. I'm 50 years old, 53, almost 54. I've always been taken care of. Things have always worked out for me. So why do I think they're not going to work out? Right? And psychedelics opens that up for me. It helped me to really connect on a deeper spiritual level that I was not able to go to.
Yeah, and it's not something where I've listened to you. It's not like something you're chasing all the time. You're not doing these things. Like, it was this moment in time that opened up for you. You did your work. It's like you got in the gym, like some people do. You get in the gym and you go do your work and you get out.
Right.
There's some people that go to the gym and they go work out and then they stay there all day long talking to everybody and they live there, right? And I look at medicine or look at psychedelics or any of these types of things. So many people live in that space.
They do.
Instead of just visiting, getting their diploma, and then going to work.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, and it's different. And what I like about our conversation is that you told me earlier, said, listen, I'm not a person that's going to say the universe. That's just not how I roll. I'm going to say God. And I said, so is this like, what kind of God is this? Is this non-denominational? Is this a religious God? Is it Christianity? Or like, what is it? And you're like, it's Christian for me. And I think it's really beautiful because I think if more people that were of any kind of faith, if they would go do that work, it would help so many things. But we have been taught to fear it.
Yes.
And everything we fear, including Christ, what do? We destroy it because we can't control it.
Right.
But the control is the illusion because people think, oh, I'm going to have control. The more control I have, the more safety I'm going to have. That's also, but that's a pathway to hell real quick.
Right.
And I think that's what we do to people. I think we can try to control them because if we can control them, we can create safety. And if we can create safety, then we won't get hurt. Right. But that's not true. But the mind makes it seem so. So way to do that, like, because, you know, in a lot of the religious books, it says not to do these things. And for some reason you decided to do those things. Maybe it was because you're at a darker point, you know, they call it the dark night of the soul a lot of ways. So maybe you're at that dark night of the soul where you decided, you know what, this is something I now need to do if I'm going to live the life I want to live, or as you would say, be in alignment. Since you've done that, how's your relationship changed with your kids?
I'm so glad you asked that question. We didn't talk about this before,
No.
but that has probably been the biggest change I've seen. And I am way more present with them. We enjoy being together. They get to see me not as that fearful, playing it safe person, but that person who's willing to take chances, that person who's encouraging them to take chances. And it's just opened up the door of communication. I am just a better human, a better mother around them now. And I own who I am. I don't try to hide it. They know I'm flawed. And it's so good we've gotten past that. So, I mean, they know I'm flawed, and
Are we not all? Jeez.
Right. And it's just this beautiful connection that we have. And they don't always like me. They're teenagers. They rarely like me. But we have this beautiful relationship. We do have fun together. They do open up to me about what they're feeling and what's hard for them. And we can have that conversation. And you don't have to be perfect. They know that. They know that's how I feel. There's no such thing. I think perfection kills creativity. I think creativity is a huge gift and that we all should explore it as much as we can. And so I just try to encourage them as much as possible. You know, they put more pressure on themselves than I probably ever did when it came to getting good grades and, you know, things like that. I'm like, I just want them to really embrace life, pursue what their hearts desire, and have that connection spiritually. I think that's so important.
Absolutely. What you've done is you've broken generational bonds and generational agreements and contracts and all kinds of things. What do I mean by that? You know, it always sounds like some esoteric, spiritual, like something going on in the ethos. No,
right.
Like the fact that the things that your mom and dad taught you, which those were from what I see is we play things safe. We don't take risks.
Right.
We don't do these things. And you now show your children, hey, we take risks, we play, we do things differently.
Right.
Like you're the one that broke those chains. And more likely than not, they're going to still have their own patterns that you taught them at some point in time, and they're going to have to break those chains too. But when we're talking about breaking generational chains or contracts, it's the contracts that because you come from this family, because we do things this way, well, then therefore you will too.
Right.
And if you don't, then guess what happens? Guilt, shame,
Right.
all the above, right? Instead of being like, oh my gosh, like women may not do this. Like our family, what you've been teaching me is not correct. It worked for you and I understand why you did it.
Right.
And I forgive you for it and I love you for it and I
Right.
release that. But now I'm going to have this kind of relationship with my children.
Right.
Which that takes a lot of bravery. It takes a lot of bravery. So through this experience for you, I know that you've had many really beautiful, maybe not many is the right word, but you've had a lot of rebirthing experiences. You know, one of the things as you were sharing with me off camera is you're like, oh, I never thought in a million years I could ever meditate because I'm just not that person. It annoyed me. And now to hear you're like, I'm meditating and I'm journaling.
Right.
Why all of a sudden do you think those things shifted for you?
Those are ways for me to connect with myself. And I wasn't doing that before. And I thought I had to shift my mindset around meditation. I thought I was going to go in some transcendent place and it was going to, I would receive divine enlightenment and things like that. And all I could think of is, oh my God, I've got like 50 things on my to-do list I need to get done. What am I doing sitting here? I just needed to be productive. Now I'm so much better when I take a break, when I give my mind time to, I have to tell you the story. It was one of the psychedelic journeys that I did, the first time I ever tried psilocybin. And it started with my body yelling at me. And my body said, you never let us do what we want to do. You never let us play. You always let the mind do all the work. You let the mind control, you let the head control you, is what I was hearing. And I was like, wow, I felt like I was being scolded. Like I was really not happy. I was like, this is not fun. I don't like this experience. But it was absolutely 100% true that I was letting the mind, all the thoughts, control everything. And then eventually the mind said, when are you going to let me dance? The body always gets to dance, but I don't get to dance. You never let me fully play and have fun. And I was like, whoa. Like I came away from that experience realizing that I wasn't connecting with me. I didn't have that connection with my body and like mind, body, spirit connection. I didn't have. And I had to find the time to really, say to the body, I hear you and I'm willing to do this different, and start to give myself opportunities to find those connections. And so much of it is, that journaling for me is about just getting all the thoughts out. All the thoughts that weren't serving me, I can get them out, release them, get them on paper and move on. Or it was in that moment of remembering like the gratitude and the gratefulness of the mind and the body and all the things, and being able to speak about it and talk about it. And I did it in a way through journaling. And so suddenly then meditation was a curiosity to me. And now I really get upset if I don't have my time to meditate.
You said one of the most beautiful words to me, and that's being curious. And I think for adults, it is extremely, and to me still to this day, the first time I went and drank ayahuasca was so I could learn how to play. Think about the stupidity in that. Because I'd forgotten how to play. I was so disconnected from myself, feeling. Right? So when I hear the word alignment, because I'm discovering and I'm like, okay, like what is alignment? How does this work? And it's when we're aligned with our mind, body, and spirit. I don't know if you agree with this or not, but when those things are in line with each other, then everything else seems to kind of flow, right? Our bodies, we're listening to our bodies, we're feeding our bodies, we're making sure our bodies are strong, we're putting in food. Our mind that we're not putting in, like I listen to some people, the way they talk to themselves, if they tell me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine being in your head all day long. Right. And having that, so then the mind, the body, and then the spirit, right? That connection to something much bigger than myself. Do I know what that's called? No. People call it God, they call it the universe, they call it Buddha, they call it Allah, they call it, we can call it many things, right? And it's all one the same.
Absolutely.
It's all the same.
Right.
It's just that some people, I believe that when we talk about the word God, that they have, again, generational traumas based upon these words or what it should be or what it shouldn't be. And I believe if we took everybody and put them in a room in any religion, in any belief system, we will find out each person has a different relationship, a different feeling that my God does this, your God does this, my God, my God, my God, my God. And then we start to realize like, oh, wait a minute, these are all self-reflections of the self. And that's what's going on. Not that there's not something greater than ourself, but it's a reflection of ourself. No different than I think if we look at, this will be an interesting conversation. When we look at AI, it's a reflection of ourself. And what we put into these machines, you know what I mean? It comes back as a reflection. And it's interesting though, I think even that concept, I think even AI right now is trying to create its own consciousness, which is a whole other story to go down another time. But so right now you've come to this place in time where your main focus, sounds like on a day-to-day basis, is to keep yourself in alignment. Like that is like the thing.
Yes.
And in doing so, You've created yourself a retreat center, and through that retreat center, you're helping a lot of people. But before I break into that, what would you tell a woman that's in her 50s right now that is feeling disconnected and doesn't know why they feel disconnected and what they should do?
I think the ability to step outside of your comfort zone is what ultimately will lead you to curiosity. And so if you can have the courage to face that and step outside that comfort zone and look for opportunities to do that, that will unlock that fear that's keeping you from really looking at yourself, connecting with yourself, speaking to yourself in the way that you do. It's keeping you from loving yourself. So if you can unlock that piece, and there's healing journeys are so unique for the individual. There's no one, for everyone. Everyone has their own journey. But it takes the ability to say, I'm willing to step into the unknown, to step into the uncomfortable, to face the fear and figure out what that is for me. And then that curiosity becomes unlocked. And that's kind of the core of what I wanted to do with my retreats, is help people, because I recognize that was me. I was that person who was there going, I don't know where I go from here or how to get there or what it looks like for me. And I was willing to, I got to a space where I was willing to try a lot of different things. Some things I would say didn't work for me, others did. And so I wanted to create that space for people to be able to be willing to step over that line of comfort and say, okay, let me just explore this and just get a little more adventurous about it. And that's at the core of why I wanted to create these retreats for women, because it helped me so much.
The one thing I want to let women know too that are listening to this show or watching, and that is this: we're not talking about the retreats that she's doing as psychedelics. No. I want to be very clear about that. We are talking about psychedelics, of course. You talked about being curious and about getting out of your comfort zone. One of the number one things I hear from women, they tell me about psychedelics, especially ayahuasca, is this: I don't want to puke. That's the number one thing. It's not that I don't want to see the devil. It's not that I don't want to see these bad things that happen to me. It's I don't want to puke. What do you tell people? Because you probably don't even want to puke either.
No, I hate it, and I still don't want to do it. But I would say, if you understand the body and how it holds on to things and holds on to the traumas and how it releases it, then you recognize puking is actually not so bad. It's good. I think without understanding that and the experience you have with puking, I'll say before that is when you're a child and you're sick, or if you drink too much and, probably not the most pleasant experiences. And even when you go through it with psychedelics, it's probably not the most pleasant experience, but there's a reward to that, and that it is a release that allows your body to let go of things that you've been holding on to that aren't serving you. So I would say that, it's whatever release it is, learn to understand, learn to see the beauty in it. For me, I had the most beautiful release when I could just break down, show full and all emotion, and cry and be angry and let it all come up. Let all the guilt and shame and judgment that I had put on myself, let it all come up and let it out. It changed me forever. It changed me forever. And I used to suffer from the time I was 10 years old from migraine headaches. I still get them from time to time, but not often. But I was going through a period a few years ago where I would have one every other week. And it's so much of what's happening to us physically can be pointed back to that trauma, that energetic trauma that you're holding on to, that your body, it's not serving your body anymore. I think that's why my body was saying to me, you're not good to us. You don't let us do what we want to do. It's that kind of thing. I wasn't being good to my body. I wasn't eating right. And it wasn't that I was eating bad. I wasn't fueling my body. All the things, nourishing my body, caring for it and loving it. It was, let me go run 5 more miles at one point in my life. And so I think it's that kind of thing that if you can really get to that connection and understand why the body does what it does, you don't worry so much about the puking part anymore.
Yeah, I saw something when we were talking about before mind-body you know, we did the one thing we didn't add, I don't think, and we added spirit, but we didn't add heart. And when I think about alignment, or when I feel through alignment at the moment, one of the things like I hear is what we were talking about, and that was like your little girl, like that inner child, which has birthed herself in a different way into your company.
Right.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah, I call her Tiny Dancer. She was the little girl who wanted to do nothing but dance and, dance and just dance and have fun. And she was the 4-year-old Sandy who believed everything was possible in life before someone told her it wasn't, and then she started to change her beliefs. And so reconnecting with her was so powerful for me. And even today, when I find myself in a moment of, oh, should I do that? What am I, I say, what would Tiny Dancer do? That fearless little girl who thought all things were possible. What would she do? And then it totally changes my perspective and usually my decision on what I should do.
Yeah, being brave, right? Being brave, because kids don't do that. The other thing too, I find like when I check in with my little boy, right? I can see him in my head. He's holding a BB gun, like I have a picture on my phone, like very clear on where he was at. And that is like, should I be doing this? Like, did I really okay, that might be fun, or this might be, but should I really be doing this and trying to check in before making those choices and decisions? And that is a way that I can keep myself in alignment. That doesn't mean, a friend of mine told me a while ago, is that we always want to keep our inner child and so we're checking with our inner child all the time. And sometimes though, we don't let our inner child grow up.
Right.
And I was like, whoa, wait a minute, because everything grows up. And so if we continue to go back to our inner child, yes, there's that playfulness, yes, there's those things, but there's also responsibility on both sides, right? As the man and as a little boy, and recognizing the two duality, because we're on a planet of duality, right? There is dark and there is light, and there is there is evil in this planet. For a long time, it took me a long time to say that.
Right.
And there is just really beautiful, good and, purity on this planet as well. There's both.
Right.
And so I would think the same thing would be true with our inner child and the adult self.
Right.
And so it's how do we merge back to alignment? How do we merge those two into our heart to where those two are not fighting each other, but they're actually coexisting together in harmony, and they're creating what you're talking about earlier, and that is an ecosystem.
Yes.
Of these 4 points. At least it's in your retreat center. What's those 4 points?
So the 4 things that I want to focus on, it starts with alignment. We talked about that. Helping people find that self-love, live that life of fulfillment and purpose, and helping them find ways to do that. And working with individuals who are at that crossroads, who are saying, this isn't working for me. I thought it was supposed to look like this, but it doesn't. Getting them into a space where they can get there and find that alignment with themselves. The second piece is amplify. And that's those people who, simply, it's the Anthony Robles's of the world, who want to help inspire others by their own story. And it's helping them figure out what that message is, who's that audience, and what is the platform they need to reach them, and really getting them on that space to be able to do that. And again, it's facing that vulnerability, willing to be vulnerable, and just the courage to speak out and tell your story, I think is so important. So that's a piece. And then the retreats and the immersive experiences is about seeing yourself in that life you've always desired, and helping create space so people can get there. And then the third part is the community. And I think that's the part where anyone can play a role, because we need that community. I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for the community that came, and supported me through my journey. So creating that community, but then also the content and information that people need to make the decisions they need to make to take on their own journey.
I love it. Yeah, it's the wisdom holders, right?
Yes.
So holders of that wisdom. And it's again, I always go back to every time anybody starts a business, especially when it comes to this, the retreat world and all of that, that is the traumas that we went through, the experiences that we had, the things that did not work for us. We're creating things and building things to be able to service the older version of ourselves.
That's right.
To bring people to this version because it made a difference. You know, it mattered.
Right.
So speaking of matter, when all's said and done and you're no longer here, what do you want to be remembered for? Like when the soul has left the body and the body is now in the ground rotting away and, you know, people are looking at your tombstone. What do you want to be remembered for?
I was fully me. Fully me. And I think the fully me is the version that the world needs to see. I think the fully any of us is what the world needs. So if I can really tap into that and let myself be vulnerable, let go of those fears and just be me, I think that's a good thing.
That's a brilliant thing. I love that. I have had nobody ever once say that. Like,
Really?
I love the fact, nope, I've never had anybody say that. I love the fact, though, it's like it comes back down to something like, oh, that's just maybe it's a selfish thing, that thought process. But I think it's full of self-love. You know what I mean? And if you can't love yourself to that level, then like, how are you going to love anybody else or make any difference? And if we're all living fully aligned, fully in ourselves, fully committed to our experiences and our greatest expression through curiosity,
Right.
then we can change a whole lot of things. And that gets us closer to bringing heaven here instead of waiting to bring it
Yes.
somewhere else.
Yeah, I totally agree
So-
with that. And I want to live the life. I want my children to fully experience me, and I want to give them permission to let the world fully experience who they are too.
Yes.
I think that's the thing. It's almost like we need that permission from each other to just be who we are.
The thing that it's like this bow. I just saw this bow wrap into my head, and that is that we talked about that all these things are about alignment, right? And we talked about bringing heaven here. But these
Right.
really are the keys to heaven.
They are.
And that is self-love, that is listening to the body,
Yes.
that is doing our own internal healing, that is creating community, that is like being fully ourselves. And if we all did that, then we would live in a beautiful place of self-exploration and play. And, you know, like, can you just imagine? Like, oh, man, that's a beautiful, beautiful sight.
It is. Can I tell you one quick story?
Please.
Talking about play. I love fast cars. I love driving fast cars.
Me too.
It's just a thing I have. And I decided one day I was going to do the Porsche driving experience.
Nice.
So I went to Atlanta just to do this. And they were like, well, what do you want to drive? I said, 911 turbo, obviously. And they're like, oh, so that's quite the car. So they gave me a Targa, which was great because I love that car too. And I knew what color. I mean, in my mind, I already knew what color Porsche I want. I know, like,
Yeah.
when I buy my car, I know exactly which one I'm going to get, right? So they gave me the exact color I wanted. It was beautiful. So I get in the car with the coach, and I realize I'm like, oh my God, now I actually have to drive this track. Like,
It's so fun.
it was the most
It's so
exhilarating 2 hours of my entire life. I walked away from that experience so happy. So, I mean, it was just so much fun. I was like, oh my God, how have I never done this? And I walked away going, I'm supposed to be a race car driver. Like, that's in my mind, right? That's who I'm supposed to be right now. And again, I do think we should all work to live in our purpose. We don't always have to monetize our purpose. I don't have to become a race car driver, but I will drive around tracks again at really what I would call crazy speeds that I never thought I would, and do fun, crazy things like that. Because it was amazing. I felt alive again.
I love it. There's a really great racetrack here in Scottsdale called Redford, which is amazing.
Yeah.
You can go race there. There's a really great one. I can't think of the name of it in Austin, which we're South by Southwest in that area out there. You go up this hill, you can't see the top of it. You have to hit the corner, and then you can't see though going up it. And then you have to hit that apex and then head down the hill. Oh, it's so fun and exhilarating though.
I did things I never thought I would do, and I had you have a coach driver in there with you, and he's telling you hit the brakes, do this,
of course.
And it was amazing. I was like, this is what I'm supposed to do for a living. Like, that's how fun it was. It was
love it.
I'm supposed to do this all the time.
We should go race cars sometimes. That would be so
let's
fun.
do it.
Is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to talk to the audience about a little bit, or anything that's on your mind?
I think the biggest thing is I just want to encourage everyone. It's never too late. You can always connect with yourself. It's never too late to find that purpose, find fulfillment in life, and don't be afraid. Like, if I can inspire people to not be afraid and take that chance and live that life that they've always dreamed of, do it. Find a way to do it. Call me. I'll help you. Like I get so lit up by this. It's so much fun for me seeing people really like let go, unlock that world in which they thought they had to live in, and just live again.
Well, let's make sure that people can find you so that you can live your life purpose, and then you can
Yeah.
assist them to live their life purpose.
Yeah.
What's the best way to find you?
So I have a website. It's opalretreats.com. That's going to be changing, but you'll always be able to find me from that. So opalretreats.com, or on Instagram, it's Retreats by Opal, or my personal Instagram. I do a lot of, thought leadership on that, is Sandy Lutton 5, at Sandy Lutton 5.
Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate you making the journey from Virginia all the way out here
of
and
course.
sitting and just being so vulnerable and so open. And I know there were so many nuggets that were shared today that that I believe that will be extremely inspiring for those that are in that space right now, in the darkness, trying to figure out how to get out of it. And you've been a light to show them how to get out of it. So I really appreciate that.
That's all I want to do. Thank you.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers.